So I just want to say welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining the session today. So we're going to be looking at the Nrsimha prayers, these prayers that we hold in great esteem, great reverence, and that we should sing every morning program. What we're going to do, as we have done in our previous sessions, is first I'm going to hand back over to Balaram Nityananda, and he will lead us in the Nrsimha prayers. He will just sing it through, because as I'm sure many of you are familiar, when you try to sing in unison on Zoom, it doesn't quite work. So he will sing the Nrsimha prayers, and then we're going to get into some discussion about some of the aspects of these particular prayers and just kind of extract or draw out the philosophy. And for those who may not have been in previous sessions, this series on the prayers of the Acaryas especially looks at the prayers that we sing that have been selected for us by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And we're also doing this to move away from the realm of mechanical devotional service, especially with regard to the prayers that we sing in the morning. There's an open secret that Prabhupada writes in his purports, which is that devotional service done in the mode of goodness is more powerful. What that means is that the same prayer sung by a group of people, they're all getting different benefit, because someone is in knowledge of the prayer, the significance of the prayer, the meaning of the prayer. So for the same time and same energy, one person gains a lot more in their devotional progress than the other individual, although both are doing the same thing at the same time, but it's not done in the same way, or more specifically, it's not done with the same consciousness. So what we're trying to do with this series is up our game, try to develop a deeper understanding. And it's a very simple underlying principle that permeates our teaching. You have the devotional service, but when it's done in knowledge, which means more in the mode of goodness, then that devotional service done in the mode of goodness reaps greater realization and progress for the individual. Okay? And this is why we want to understand these prayers, so we can lift ourselves out of the realm of mechanical devotional service. Mechanical meaning that it's affected to a good extent by ignorance. We're going through the motions, as opposed to doing it with awareness, knowledge, and appreciation, which is mode of goodness. A mode of goodness devotional service is much faster and much more accelerated in the progress than devotional service done in ignorance. Okay. That said, I'm going to hand back over to Balaram Nityananda, and then we will start to discuss from there. Balaram, over to you.
Nrsimha Dalita Hiranyakashipu Dano Keshavadrita Naranirupa Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Keshavadrita Naranirupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Nrsimha Jaya Nrsimha Jaya Nrsimha Jaya Nrsimha Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Nitai Guru Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Jai Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagwan Ki Jai Bhaktaraj Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari.
Thank you very much, Karu. So let's say Mangalacharyan, and there's a few things I want to discuss in relation to this prayer, and we may even bring in a few interactive elements to the presentation today. We'll see how we go. Okay. Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshum Litamina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Purjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Vadan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchikapatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vachapatiknam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so thank you all for coming. There's so many other things that you can be doing with your time. So we want to make sure that as much as possible that we share something that's going to be useful for all of us on our journey back home, back to Godhead. So we've been going through the prayers of the Vaishnava Acaryas. And today we're looking at the prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev. These are prayers given to us, prayers that Prabhupada has asked us to recite. And we'll just touch upon some of the key elements of the prayers, again, with the idea of being more conscious about these prayers, why we say these prayers, and the purpose behind it. And I'm going to ask you to begin by doing a little meditation for me. So I'm going to ask you to all close your eyes. Okay, so wherever you are, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And what I'm going to ask you to do is as follows. With your eyes closed, I'm going to ask you to just go back in time a little. I'd like you to go back in time to an instant and a situation in your life, not too intense, but one where you felt a little bit fearful. Okay? So travel back to a time in your life. It can be any time, nothing too intense, not too serious a situation, but a situation where you felt a little bit fearful. It may have been you were around a manager or someone who, you felt a little bit, an authority figure you felt intimidated by. It could be, there was a sense of danger in the environment because of something. Maybe it was an animal or someone was shouting. Some people were in a conflict, whatever it is, a situation where you felt a sense of fear. I'd like you to bring your mind back to that particular situation. And when you go back to that situation, what I'd like you to do is freeze the situation around you. Okay? Imagine you're able to put the situation on pause. So the situation is frozen, but you're still alert, you're still aware, you're still in the situation. Now, what I'd like you to do in your imagination, I'd like you, and you can do this, if you're left-handed, use your left hand. If you're right-handed, you're going to use your right hand. But whichever hand that you use normally, let's say your writing hand, I'd like you to have that hand by your side as normal, right? Just your hands, your arms hanging down by your side, by the side of your body. But with that hand, I'd like you to just move it slightly to reach out, to hold on to someone else's hand. And I'd like you to imagine that that hand is holding on to Lord Nrsimhadev's hand. Okay? I'd like you to imagine that that hand that you're holding is grasping the hand of Sri Nrsimhadev Bhagavan. And as you're holding that hand, I'd like you to imagine that as you hold his hand, an energy from him surges into your own body. An energy of great peace, first of all. Great peace and stillness. But within that peace and stillness, a sense of unbelievable strength, confidence, and fearlessness. As you're holding the hand of Lord Nrsimhadev, I'd like you to imagine that he's sending into your body this deep energy, as we said, of peace. Every part of you feels peaceful. Every single atom, every single part of you feels great peace, a great stability. And more, every part of you, every cell of your body feels a sense of confidence and a sense of complete and utter fearlessness. That nothing, no one can harm you, and you're feeling a sense of permanent, literally, unending or infinite security. I want you to imagine that permeating through your entire being. A sense of unending peace, a sense of complete security. You know, not just theoretically, but you have complete realization that nothing, no one can harm you. And you're doing this while you're feeling your hand, your writing hand, the hand that you tend to use, being held firmly but lovingly in the hand of Lord Nrsimhadev. I just want you to imagine this feeling. Peace, confidence, security, and fearlessness coming from the Nrsimhadev, literally coming through to you and infusing every part of your being, every cell of your being. And I want you to imagine that this feeling goes deeper and deeper and deeper into every cell of your being, every aspect of your being. As you do this, I want you to really also be conscious and imagine the feeling of Lord Nrsimhadev's hand, a feeling of great strength, but also great softness, simultaneously incredibly strong and unbelievably soft, loving, and affectionate. Allow this experience to really settle into you. This peace, this deep peace, this deep sense of security, this deep sense of confidence, and this extraordinary sense of fearlessness that you're experiencing because you are connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Nrsimhadev Bhagavan. Just allow that feeling to really rest in you. And then I'm going to start counting, and I'm going to count from 1 to 3. And when I come to the count of 3, what I'm going to ask you to do is to slowly bring your awareness back to where you are after the count of 3. And then I'm going to ask you to do one more thing before we move on. So when I get to the count of 3, bring your awareness back to where you are. Open your eyes and bring yourself back to the room that you are in. After the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And what I'm going to ask all of you to do now, and you can put this in the chat window, I want you to consider the following question. How would your life be different if you carried that sense of fearlessness, confidence, security, and peace? How would your life be different if you carried that feeling with you every moment of every day and in every circumstance? I'm going to ask you to just put some answers in the chat window and send to all participants. If you could do that for me now, please. How would your life be different if you carried that sense, that feeling with you at every moment of every day throughout your entire life? Okay, I can see some responses coming through. Thank you, Harshel. Definitely anxiety disappears. Okay, Rupesha, I think that's a really powerful point. Not only fearless, and I appreciate also, Siddharth, you put fearless, but there's also a certain response to that. Fearless and do anything. Okay, fantastic. Kanchanaba, Definitely I'd stop feeling insecure. We all have insecurities. It's natural in this material world. So thank you for sharing that. It takes a certain strength of character to also be vulnerable. So thank you. Ankit, be at peace and connected to the Supreme, absolutely. Interesting, Chirag, you talked about relentless drive, and that's interesting because there's another comment talking about not just the feeling, but how it spills over into certain behaviors. Excellent. How would we be feeling? Ram, fearlessness changes how you act. The priorities change. Very, very thoughtful and insightful comment. So that it would change the way that we focus on what we focus on. Good. Praxita, I hope I, Pratika. Oh, I'm getting your name wrong, but I'm apologizing for that. But definitely calm and grounded. Okay, Shilan, lightweight. Okay, definitely, Ram. And this is one of the things we're going to talk about. That fearlessness definitely also impacts on our surrender. Okay, there's another point. There's another aspect to this. Thank you, Jay. More confident and unstoppable. Okay, let's take it a step further. Let's bring this to the world that we're in today. How would our human society, how would people as a mass, okay, on a societal and global level, how would their behavior be different? How would humanity's behavior be different if everyone had that same quality of fearlessness, security, confidence, and peace? Okay, definitely. Kanchanaba, no conflict. Good. What else? I'd like to hear from more people. On a global level, imagine the world as we live in it, with everyone feeling that sense of fearlessness, confidence, security, and peace. Okay. Rupeshra, definitely more harmony. Jitesh, deeper empathy. Absolutely. Ram, we'd stop building so many in forms of fearing and defending. Very interesting. Ankit, I love your point, Ankit. Compassion, servitude, and balance. We will tie that into a particular prayer in the Bhagavatam from Prahlad Maharaj. Thank you. Simran, thank you for joining. People follow their passion rather than chasing money for security. Very great point. Thank you for that. Because yes, so many things that we do are oriented by security, and actually underneath that need for security is often a certain fear, an insecurity. Fear is insecure, is an insecurity. Rupeshra, yes, maybe more unison in general. Okay, now, I'm going to go into why I've asked you to do this particular practice at the beginning of our discussion on Lord Nrsimhadev. I wanted to make sure that we see the practical utility of what we're discussing, the practical utility of the practical genius of Srila Prabhupada emphasizing these particular prayers, giving these prayers, because we have so many prayers in our tradition, but giving these prayers as a staple, right? So after the Aarti, we sing the Nrsimhadev prayers. Morning Aarti, but not only morning Aarti. Other Aartis that we sing in the day, think about this, right? You go to the temple in the evening, you may go after work, so Gora Aarti is going on. After Gora Aarti, we do the Prem Dwani prayers, but before we go to honor Prasadam, Mahaprasadam, we will also sing these prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev. These prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev are not even sung once in the day. Many of the morning prayers once in the day. Hare Krishna mantra throughout the day. Nrsimhadev prayers more than once in the day of our devotional schedule. They're significant. What you've shared as a group and what we did as a little meditation exercise, a visualization exercise, is you've tuned us all in with your collective realization on what happens when a person is fearless. There's a very interesting tie-in. The name convention, the naming of Srila Prabhupada. He's born Abhay Charan. Interesting name, right? Abhay Charan, one who is fearless at the lotus feet of Krishna. It is our conviction that that naming convention, and we see this again and again, Krishna arranges for his pure devotee. The naming convention is not an accident. There are no accidents. The naming convention has significance if we're conscious. If an individual is conscious, that means you're aware. And then along with being conscious, you have knowledge. You have this understanding given in our line that everything in Krishna consciousness is significant. There are no accidents. It's an arrangement by the Lord. And if it's an arrangement by the Lord for everyone, how much more it's an arrangement by the Lord when we're dealing with his pure devotee. So the naming convention is immediately, to someone who's attentive, who's sharp, who's intelligent, that means something. This person who is predicted in scripture to, what is the prediction? Senapati Bhakta, right? The commander-in-chief of Lord Chaitanya's army. Yeah? The bounty hunter who's going to come and snatch souls out of Maya. And he's born with the name Abhay Charan, one who is fearless at the lotus feet of Krishna. And we ask you to tune in and just think about the power of this. What would happen if you had no fear? How would you live differently if you had no fear? The reason why we're asking you to consider this is very simply because this morning prayer, this prayer that has been given by Srila Prabhupada for all of us, and the process itself of Krishna consciousness is actually a means towards fearlessness. Fearlessness in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This prayer in particular as a focused sadhana, but the act and the practice of Krishna consciousness as a general lifestyle and orientation, they achieve the same purpose. And we're going to explore and discuss and draw upon how these things are done in this particular prayer. So let's look at this. I offer my obeisances to Lord Nrsimha, who is always giving bliss to his devotees like Prahlad Maharaj. It's very interesting. This first statement, I offer my obeisances. Namaste, Namaste Nrsimhaya. The first thing that we do in spiritual life is we pay our respects. What does respect mean? It has a very, very deep meaning. Just like you have the word spectacular or spectacle, it actually is a function of the vision. It is literally the ability to see. We offer obeisances, we offer respect. It is recognizing the true nature of someone. So what happens in spiritual life is, as we recognize the nature of his incarnations, the true nature of their nama, rupa, guna, lila, name, form, qualities. Qualities are very significant, pastimes. It changes how we behave. It changes how we orientate ourselves in the world. What do I mean by this? Nrsimha, let's go back a stage. Krishna is, as we know, Bhagavatam says this, Ete chamsa kalapumsa, Krishna stu Bhagavan Swam. There are many incarnations of God. In fact, there are infinitely many forms of the Lord. Uncountable. However, they all have their own mood, their own particular bhava. What is special about the form of Nrsimha is that Krishna himself, he can give anything, but he's particularly inclined to give something or to give certain things when he's in a different form or different forms. So different forms of the Lord, different incarnations of Krishna, they are inclined to give certain things. Okay, so for example, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what is he particularly inclined to give? He's inclined to give Namo Mahavanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate, Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gora Tvashe Namaha. He's glorified by the Goswamis because he's particularly inclined to give love of Krishna. in the wake of the Vrajvasis, by the way. He's particularly inclined to give Vraj Prema. So, Nrsimhadev. We pray to Lord Nrsimhadev, but we're Krishna Bhaktas. Why are we praying to him? What is it that Lord Nrsimhadev is particularly inclined to give? Three things. Protection, fearlessness, and the third one is strength. So Krishna comes in the form of Nrsimhadev, and he's more ready and willing to distribute these particular qualities: protection, fearlessness, and strength. Now, we ask you to think about what this means on a mass level and what this means on an individual level. Let's make it real. How many of you, and you can use your reactions, how many of you have noticed that in the modern world, people are more easily triggered? If that's something that you're perceiving, use your emoticon and just maybe give me a thumbs up. How many of you are perceiving that there's a lot more tendency in the modern world that people may be more sensitive to things, more easily triggered? Absolutely. Many of us are seeing that in the modern society. And it has a natural link and correlation to the fact that people do not feel protection. They don't feel protected. And therefore, they do not feel fearless. And in fact, many people lack a sense of feeling that they themselves are strong. They do not feel that they're backed up. In other words, the way that the modern society orientates most people is towards a sense of insecurity. And because of insecurity, you get this overreaction or reticence to react. So people are shy to speak up, or they over-respond, and it's all due to insecurity. The Nrsimhadev prayers, if they're done properly with conscious awareness, they actually bring about a greater sense of fearlessness. I offer my obeisance to Lord Nrsimhadev, but who's doing what? First of all, the respect is being given, the recognition of his power. He's God, his power to protect us in all circumstances. Everyone has a scope of protection. But the scope of protection is different for different people. Some people, they can protect you in their official capacity. Other people, they can protect you in a certain limited time frame. This person can protect us forever. And what is he doing? He's always giving bliss to his devotees like Prahlad Maharaj. Always giving bliss to his devotees who are like Prahlad Maharaj. The material world is a very difficult place. It's a very difficult place. Why? Why is the material world a difficult place? One of the reasons why the material world is a difficult place is because everyone in the material world has a weakness, okay? And the weakness is something that stems from our eternal nature, where Anandamaya Vyasat, therefore everyone wants to be happy. It is an eternal need. Now, let's take it a step further. I want to be happy, but I don't know how to act, or I'm unwilling to access the deep, lasting happiness of Krishna consciousness. So therefore, the only other option I have is to engage in material life, okay? If I don't find happiness in spiritual life, I'm forced to look for it elsewhere. And the only other option is material life. What does that mean for me practically? Well, it means for me practically is I'm going to get addicted to the material energy. Some people are addicted to the pious aspect of the material energy, right? Traditional, cultured people. It's still material, but it's a pious aspect. Most people now, unfortunately, are impious. So when they get into the material energy, They don't even get into the mode of goodness aspects of material energy. It just goes down, okay? Addiction, whether it's sex, whether it's drugs, whether it's a number of different things, it's just different forms of even the impious aspect of the material energy. So this second line, or this second part of this prayer, is so much more significant than people realize. Because one of the things that protect us from turning to the material energy is what? Is that the fact that we're gaining something from the engagement in devotional life. Nrsimha is always giving bliss to his devotees like Prahlad. But there's one other factor to this, and that is tapa, okay? That bliss that we want to experience, that we're looking for, we have to be ready to roll our sleeves up and to make a journey for it. This word tapa is very interesting. Tapa means fire. If we think about the pastime, Hiranyakashipu, why was he so powerful? He was so powerful because he performed austerity. He performed tapa. So tapa means fire. What actually happens when a devotee, or anyone actually, because it's not just even spiritual people, even material people, they perform austerity. And what does the austerity do? The austerity gives them a certain energy, a certain type of energy. And that energy, or tapa, is a potency. Prabhupada also mentions he mentions Gandhari. What did she do? She performed a certain type of tapa. So her husband, Dhritarashtra, is born blind. So in trying to take a humble position to her husband, what does she do? She wears a blindfold. Tapa, austerity. By performing this tapa, this austerity, what happens? Her vision becomes powerful. So in the pastime of the Mahabharata, she calls for her son, right? Dhritarashtra. I'm sorry, not Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana. She asks for her son to come to see her. And she knows that if she takes off her blindfold and he sees her, her vision, gazing upon his body, will make his body strong, impenetrable. Okay? So in this pastime, he's on his way to see his mother, but he's actually completely naked. So he's seen by Krishna. Krishna's, what are you doing? Where are you going? I'm going to see my mother. Okay, look, you should at least cover your private parts, okay? It's uncultured to go completely naked. So he does that. So when his mother gazes upon him, his body becomes impenetrable except for a certain area. And we know how significant that will be, because that will be also something that allows him to be defeated ultimately by the Pandavas, okay? But this tapa, this austerity that gives a certain potency is there. You should be sure, I'll be honest with you, you should know as devotees, when you perform austerities according to your level of qualification, with a sincere purpose of making spiritual advancement, that tapa, that devotional austerity that you're performing, it actually is reciprocated with by the Lord, and it gives you greater spiritual strength. Yeah? It gives you a certain energy. I was in India. There's devotees, Raghunath and Kasturba. They have a podcast called Wisdom of the Sages. So I would see them in India. We would spend some time together in India, and they'd bring different groups, and I'd come with a group. And I remember speaking to Kasturba one year. He's a very intelligent devotee. He's an intelligent devotee, I'll tell you, because what he said to me, I could understand. This person, he understands, he's reflected upon our teachings, he's sharp. He told me, he was talking about Radha Maharaj. He said something very insightful to me about Radha Maharaj. He said to me, he'd seen Maharaj in different circumstances. And he said that I can see Maharaj is so powerful. And he said, I can understand that it's the austerities that Maharaj has performed over many years, different types of devotional austerities That's why he's so potent. That's why he has such a transformative effect on people. Very, very interesting comment. I thought, wow, we were in the we were outside the Chowpatty temple. We were speaking because he'd brought a group from New York. That particularly, he'd come with a group there, and I thought, yeah, this person's actually intelligent. He actually understands how things actually work. You see, this is a thing, and this is why spiritual life is so powerful. It literally allows you to see behind the curtain and to see what really makes things work. You know, I see sometimes some devotees, if they're not so deep, they think that things are working on the external level. Externals do have a role, don't get me wrong. We should be very real about that. But there's something that's driving that particular external. And there's even something that informs the externals. The intelligence that one has is ultimately a gift from Krishna. Again, instructive this past time. Hiranyakashipu has performed austerities. And as a result of these austerities, who comes to see him? Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma comes to see Hiranyakashipu. Now Hiranyakashipu, what he actually requests of Lord Brahma says he can't give him. Well, the first request he has of Lord Brahma is, I want you to make me immortal. That's actually what Hiranyakashipu asks. Hiranyakashipu, a lover of, gold and soft beds. That means he's into two things, sex and money. Two things, sex and money. And when he's asking Brahma to make him immortal, what he wants actually, I want to be able to enjoy forever. That's what he's looking for. And then Lord Brahma will say to him, look, even I'm not immortal. How am I going to make you immortal? I don't even have it myself. I can't give you something that I don't have. Very instructive point. I cannot give to you something that I myself do not have. Now, what does Hiranyakashipu do at this point? And this relates to what we're saying about intelligence. What does he do? What does someone do who's attached to sense gratification and is asking someone who can't give it to him? He tries to play God, right? This is the material mentality. I can't get what I want directly, so let me try and manipulate the situation to still get what I want. So now it becomes, okay, make sure I can't be killed in the daytime or the nighttime. Make sure I can't be killed in the land or the air, etc. He gives so many different stipulations. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to use his intelligence to get around a certain situation. You see? But Krishna is in the heart. Savasya chaham ridishani vishto mata smriti jnanam apohanam cha vedescha save aham eva vedyo vedantakrit vedavit eva chaham. Krishna says this to Arjuna. He says, from me comes three things: knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So our intelligence is sanctioned by the Lord. If Krishna doesn't want you to have intelligence, you won't know, it won't even occur to you to ask for the right thing. Isn't that interesting? And we see that, this case of Hiranyakashipu. So he's asking for all these conditions, but he won't have the intelligence to ask in such a way that he cannot be killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It was so interesting. I was working in a particular company years ago. And one person who I was a manager of, before I became his manager, I mean, to be honest, he was badly behaved, this person. And we don't have to edit anything, right? It's badly behaved. We don't have to edit anything on this one. Anyway, what happened was, one day he told me something. I asked him, I said, how do you decide how you interact with people? And he said to me something very interesting. He said to me, I watch people and I see what they allow others to get away with. And based upon what they allow others to get away with, that determines how I treat them. He was a person in the mode of ignorance. And he told me that. Now, what was very interesting is he was sharp. Okay, but It came to me a few years after. It was so amazing. I saw how sharpness works, how this kind of craftiness works, and what Krishna does to someone who's crafty, right? And how it works even in the devotional vision. It's so interesting. So craftiness works like this. Someone is very sharp, okay? You've heard of the big fish in a small pond. So you can have someone who's incredibly crafty, incredibly sharp. But what Krishna does through the modes, let's put it that way. You see, the more that there's a higher mode, the broader one's vision is. And the more that there's a lower mode, the vision shrinks. So you can have someone who's very sharp, but they're in a lower mode. So what happens is they're sharp, but because they're in a lower mode, they're sharp within a small arena. You understand what happens, right? So so the big fish in the small pond. It's a small pond, he's the big fish. So he's very sharp within the realm of the pond. So he knows how to bully the other fish. He knows how to prey on the other fish. All of these different things he can do within his small arena of awareness. But he has no control over things which are outside of his scope of awareness. So what happens? So you have a small pond in the village. The big fish is in the small pond, lording it over the other fishes. But what happens? There are people in the village. They get together one day, they have a discussion, they decide, you know what, that pond is kind of in the wrong place. What should we do? We're gonna drain the pond. Okay? So although the fish is sharp within his small arena, he doesn't understand that there's a much bigger world. There's a much bigger paradigm beyond the pond. So anyone who has a wider perspective, anyone who has vision of a broader range of events, they are immediately in a stronger position. He can lord it over people in that small area, but the moment other people who move beyond his arena see what's going on, they can immediately take him out. Immediately. So this craftiness is what we see in the material world. Someone thinks I'm winning in the material energy, but they don't see the bigger picture. They don't see the bigger picture. Duryodhan, perfect example. I'm going to defeat the Pandavas. I'm going to cheat them. We're going to arrange a gambling match, but you don't see the bigger picture. I'm going to get Krishna's army. I'm going to get Bhishma Dev. I'm going to get Dronacharya, but you don't see the bigger picture. He doesn't see the bigger picture. When you see the bigger picture, then you can understand the real ideal solution to your problems. That is what Krishna consciousness is meant to do. It's meant to give everyone the bigger picture. You go to an office program, right? End of year Christmas party. Obviously, they didn't have one last year because everyone was self-isolating. You go to the end of year Christmas party. You know, everyone is having meat. You're not eating meat. They think, oh, you know, you're missing out. They don't see the bigger picture. They don't see the bigger picture. They think you're missing out. You think they're missing out. Actually, they think you're missing out. You know they're missing out. They don't see the bigger picture. The amazing thing with spiritual life is if you understand it properly, my God, it makes you so intelligent. Intelligence is also a function of seeing the bigger picture. You see? I was having an interesting conversation yesterday with Prema Govinda. And we were talking about many things, and I was telling him something that I'd realized. I said to him, Prema Govinda, because we were talking about how, you know, so many people are going through so many difficulties due to what's happened in the last year. And I figured out, how do you survive a society which is becoming more artificial and therefore creating all kinds of mental, emotional, psychological, and social problems for themselves? And it came to me, it's like a scale. So on one end of the scale, you have artificiality, right? So you get more and more an artificial lifestyle, more and more technology, more and more kind of, trying to just do things in a very artificial way. And I thought, so what is the opposite of artificial? The opposite of artificial is what? Someone just put it into the chat window for me. It's pretty obvious. What is the opposite of artificial? Exactly, Ram, natural. And it's amazing. So I figured it out and I thought, let's see, does that fit what we see in our Vedic tradition, in our Vedic teaching? Absolutely. There was articles I found, right? So the articles I found on Ayurveda, it said what you do to counteract the effect of looking at computer screens all the time is you spend more time in nature and you live a more natural lifestyle. Why? So in the article it was explained that when you look at the computer screen, see, it explained that naturally people lived according to the cycle of the sun. So what happens is when the sun goes down, so sunset, your body understands, okay, things are becoming dim. And because things are becoming dim, that means it's evening. Because it's evening, we should be preparing to retire and take rest. Okay, so the sun would have a link to the body, and in the article it's talking about melatonin. And melatonin production is a particular thing that's produced in the body which helps sleep. So the circadian rhythm, which is the natural rhythm of the body, was linked to the actual daily rhythm. So people would know, okay, it's getting dark, so the body would start to prepare itself for sleep. But because we have an artificial lifestyle where there's so much artificial light from our computers, fluorescent lights, smartphones, the body becomes confused because there's so much light coming in. So the melatonin production is disturbed. And because the melatonin production is disturbed, people have insomnia, they have all kinds of things because their bodily rhythm is now out of balance. Okay, so what it was talking about in the article is, therefore, the solution is to live more naturally. So rise early, Prabhupada explains that. Sleep at the right time, sleep at the same time, have that rhythm, that routine, spend more time in nature, which counteracts the effect of technology. So on the one end, you have artificiality, on the other end, you have natural. So you counteract one end of the spectrum by making sure you bring elements of the other end of the spectrum, and the two things together bring everyone back into balance. So this is understood when you see what? You see the bigger picture. You see the bigger vision of Shastra. And this is what we're really being gifted. And this is what real intelligence is. You make a decision based upon what? Based upon seeing the bigger picture. So what people think that they're achieving in the short term, you see that differently. You can see, yes, you're getting something in the short term, but because you're doing the wrong thing, in the long term, you're going to have to pay for that. And that's what happened with Hiranyakashipu. Short term, I do this austerity, I get these boons. But he is going to have to pay for that. Well, it's the opposite way of living. These behaviors that we see in Prahlad Maharaj, they're role models for us. What does Prahlad Maharaj do? He takes shelter of Lord Nrsimha at every moment. He becomes fearless, and what does he engage in? He engages in sharing Krishna consciousness with others. And therefore, he's always joyful. He's always joyful. We see in the pastime, he is with his classmates. What does he teach them? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. He teaches them about the 9 processes of devotional service, and he tells them this is what you should all be doing. We should all be engaging in this 9 processes, to the point that his teachers are completely shocked. Like, where's he getting all this stuff from? Who's most shocked? The person who's most shocked is his father. So when he explains what he's learning, when he explains to Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyakashipu is so angry. He's angry that his son, who he wants to become a demon like him, is instead a great devotee. And this is a normal polarity. The polarity between the demons and the devotees. We should be very honest with you. Prabhupada actually writes this. I was just making notes from one class that Prabhupada gave. He makes a very interesting point. He says, let's see. Actually, yeah. He says that when you engage in devotional service, there'll be so many critics and so many enemies. It's not a small thing. That point by Prabhupada is not a small thing. It links directly to the role of Nrsimhadev, right? You can be very successful in spiritual life. You can understand that these things have to be there, challenges have to be there, but you can ride through the challenges. Why? Because you're very secure. What makes you very secure is that you feel protected. You see? What makes you secure in spiritual life is that you feel protected because you've built the connection with Krishna. And what makes you also enthusiastic in spiritual life. Prabhupada, I was listening to I was reading some comments by Prabhupada in one lecture. He says it all begins with enthusiasm. These 6 factors which are favorable for devotional life, he says it begins with enthusiasm. He said without enthusiasm, the other qualities won't come. Very interesting statement by Prabhupada. Enthusiastic. My spiritual master was in Africa, and he was in one country, and they'd made a banquet in his honor. So he was preaching to one African leader who was becoming very favorable, but this person had ministers who were very unfavorable, and they were communists. They hated this idea of anything godlike, anything theistic. They were all atheists. So there was a banquet, and he was my spiritual master was being honored, and they couldn't tolerate it. So they decided to accuse him to make an accusation towards him in front of everyone. So they said to him, Swami, how do we know you're not some of these Western agencies who are kind of coming with some ulterior motive? That was what they actually accused him of. And he threw it back in their face. And he actually turned the accusation on them. And he said, you guys talk about being, for the people. He said, but many of you set terrible examples. You have illicit affairs, you cheat people, you steal money, you embezzle funds. He just kind of named all of these things. He said, you're a terrible example. So how can you come and talk about being for the people when your own life is a terrible example to the people that you claim to love and serve? And of course, they had nothing to say. This sense of fearlessness, it is so interesting. I'll be very honest with you. We sometimes even see in our devotional communities. Sometimes if the culture is poor, then you have people being materialistic and proud of being materialistic. People being rude and proud of being rude. People being disrespectful and proud of being disrespectful. People being offensive and they're acting like, yeah, I'm offensive. And you sometimes see this in modern culture, right? Who can be the most sarcastic? Who can be the most belittling? Who can be the most disrespectful of other people? And we have to be so careful. The worst thing is when it becomes acculturated, right? So when it becomes cool to be rude to people, when it becomes cool to be disrespectful to the devotees, when it becomes cool to be to cheat other people, then we're in trouble. Because what happens is when it becomes cool, when it becomes acceptable to behave badly, then you'll see that the culture just goes down. And 2 things happen. It becomes so negative that no one can trust anyone. Then the culture is destroyed. And what accelerates that is that people who are cultured, they start to see what's going on. They think, wow, this is terrible. These people are rude, they're harsh, they're disrespectful. And then cultured people just think, you know what? I don't want to be part of this anymore. And they leave. Because the negativity becomes acculturated. Right? In other words, people feel that they get appreciation and recognition by acting badly. So we have to be very, very careful about that in our devotional communities. So anyway, that's an aside. So Hiranyakashipu tries to use his intelligence, but he can't. The most intelligent thing is what? The most intelligent thing is to surrender to Krishna. We have this teaching, Siddhanta. Siddhanta means the conclusion of the Shastras, right? That means that when someone is intelligent, what does it mean exactly? When someone is intelligent, intelligence is the ability to come to the right conclusion, right? Siddhanta, the conclusions of the Shastra. That means when you take into account everything that Shastra says, what is the conclusion? the conclusion is that each and every one of us should surrender to Krishna. Not partially, by the way, not partial surrender, 100% surrender. If someone has really understood the teachings, the conclusion of all the teachings, if you take into account what the material energy is like, what the conditioned living entities are like, what material enjoyment is like, how many times you can suffer in this material world, if you take it all into account properly, the conclusion is you need to surrender and take shelter of Krishna, not because he's telling you you have to. That's not true. Not because Krishna said you have to do it. No, it's actually intelligent. If you take everything into account, you're going to die. And everything that you look for materially is going to leave you, or you're going to leave it. Someone who's intelligent and takes everything into account properly, the sign of that is that they surrender to Krishna. That is why in the scripture, it is described that the devotee is what? They're sumedashaha. They're the most intelligent. And those who are into more material forms of behavior, demigod worship, etc., what are they described as? Bhagavad Gita, alpamedashaha. Those who have little intelligence, they're not very smart, right? Because they haven't really thought things through properly. It's actually a model. It's actually a model that's embedded in our Shastra. Someone who's more intelligent, who takes into account everything, you can tell how intelligent a person is by the conclusion that they reach. Right? Because the more intelligent a person is, the more their conclusion has taken into account everything that's relevant. Right? Devotees, they may not even do this consciously. The fact that you've come to Krishna means you're most intelligent. Bus. It is literally the conclusion of every kind of experience in the material world, is that if you take into account everything you can experience, what's the conclusion? Better surrender to Krishna. Right? You're looking for joy, he can give it to you. Even if you want material things, right? He can give it to you. Better to surrender to Krishna. That is what it means to be most intelligent. In this prayer, this joy is important because that joy is also a form of protection. You're looking for happiness. If we don't find it in a higher form, we'll look for it in a lower form. So it is emphasized here. He's always giving bliss to his devotees. Bliss and material happiness are not the same thing. They have different terminology. Introduction to Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada says Chapala Sukha, flickering happiness. But this, what is it? Praladalada Dayane. Huh? This real joy, this ananda, Praladananda, this ananda is always coming to Pralad. And Nrsimha is chiseling at the hearts of demons like Hiranyakashipu. Chiseling at the hearts of demons like Hiranyakashipu. It's very interesting. If you notice, it's plural. Hearts of demons, plural. Chiseling, cutting through. We need Nrsimha to take these things out of our heart. In Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 18, text number 8, in the purple, Prabhupada says we should pray that Lord Nrsimha also removes these impurities from our heart. I remember I was at a house program with Pankajangari. He said something really interesting. Nrsimha had appeared to a devotee in a dream. He told me this, it was after a house program, after a class that was given at the house program. So he told me this pastime, real pastime, right, modern day pastime. A devotee had a dream, and in the dream, Lord Nrsimha had appeared to this devotee. And what Nrsimha did is he had his claws out. And in his claws, he had all this really black stuff. And Nrsimha told the devotee, he said, you know what this is? And he said to the devotee, he said, this is lust. He had all this black, kind of black substance in his hands. He said, this is lust. And he said to the devotee, and he pointed to the devotee's heart, and he said, and there's a lot of this in there. He told him that. He said that there's a lot of this in there. And he pointed to the devotee's heart. And Pankajangri, he was explaining He said, if you pray to Lord Nrsimhadev, he can remove all of this. He'll remove all this lust from the heart. And he said something very interesting to me. He said, and you know what? He said, you won't even feel a thing. Very interesting. He can remove all this lust from the heart and you won't even feel a thing. So this is why we pray to Lord Nrsimhadev. And Prabhupada explains in that place in Bhagavatam that we should make those kinds of prayers. You know, please remove all this lust, all these impurities from my heart, so I can actually serve you. So Nrsimhadev is that form. He's giving this joy to Prahlad Maharaj. He's killing the demons like Hiranyakashipu, also the demons in our heart. Then it says the devotees always sees Lord Nrsimhadev everywhere. Lord Nrsimha is within and without. Therefore, let us take shelter of Lord Nrsimhadev. Again, this idea of protection. This idea of taking shelter. You become fearless according to the quality of your shelter, actually. The better the shelter is, the more you will feel fearlessness. And if the shelter is poor, then you become the opposite. If the shelter is weak, then instead of becoming fearless, we become fearful. We become completely full of fear. And that's why in the material world, people are fearful. People are fearful in the material world because the shelter is not real. The shelter itself is vulnerable, temporary, right? Weak, manipulative, right? How can you take shelter of someone who's going to exploit you? You can't do it, right? If you know someone to be exploitative, cheating mentality, weak character, you can't take shelter of them because you know if you take shelter of them, they'll take advantage of you. So there's always insecurity in the material world, in the political sphere, in every sphere, right? People can't trust their politicians because they're being told just what is going to be required for that politician to be re-elected. They don't care about the people. They care only about themselves. And that brings up a quality of shelter. Shelter requires selflessness. If someone isn't selfless, how can they provide you shelter? Because there'll be at some point a contradiction between their own agenda and yours. And at that point, you're in trouble. So these are some of the subtleties to these particular prayers. And the very special position and significance of Sri Nrsimhadev Bhagavan. Let's go to this last verse. Oh, my Lord Nrsimhadev, your hands are very beautiful like the lotus flower, but with your long nails, you have ripped apart the wasp Hiranyakashipu. Unto you, Lord of the universe, I offer my humble obeisances. So this is from Dasavatar Stotra by Jayadev Goswami. So Lord Nrsimhadev completely rips apart Hiranyakashipu. Right? Hiranyakashipu becomes more and more angry, but why? Because he's in competition with Krishna. And this is a subtle thing that we all have to deal with in our lives, by the way. In our life, we have to deal with this competition with Krishna. And because we have competition with Krishna, we also have competition with each other. Okay? I want to compete with Krishna. I want to compete with being the center. And because I want to compete with being the center, I have to also now compete with other devotees. So again, in our communities, we sometimes have this mixed devotion. I want to be a devotee, but I've got all these other motives, ulterior motives, right? And what happens is, that is why we often cannot communicate and collaborate and cooperate properly as devotees, because there's still a cheating tendency. There's still a tendency to want to cheat. So rather than us all helping the movement to flourish, I want to flourish at your expense. Okay? And of course, unfortunately, then we cannot be immature or naive about it. Therefore, we have to deal with the devotees according to the degree that they are actually devotees. Right? That is the point. Everyone is a devotee to a degree. In other words, the soul is a devotee, but in the conditioned world, the soul has conditioning. So to what extent that person is still under the control of their conditioning, to that extent, they're still in the material world. And when one is no longer under the control of their conditioning, that is the person that you call, yes, this is a pure devotee. Right? This is the actual Uttama Adhikari, rather than a Kanishta Adhikari or a Madhyam Adhikari. So we can't be sentimental in spiritual life. We deal with people based upon their what? Adhika, their actual qualification. While at the same time doing that in a way that still encourages everyone, including ourselves, to grow and to develop in our spiritual life. Okay. So what we'll do, maybe we'll stop there. Yeah, maybe we'll stop there and we'll just see if there are any questions that anyone has. And if so, feel free to put your answers and your questions maybe in the chat window and send to all participants, or you can just ask, you can unmute and you can ask on the audio of the Zoom. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Yes. Ram, Moy Prabhu explained that the esoteric reason for these prayers is to remove obstacles in spiritual life. Definitely. As we said, protection, fearlessness, and strength. Definitely the removal of obstacles in our spiritual life. That's definitely one of the reasons that this is given. And it's one of the reasons why we worship Nrsimha. Absolutely. Because Ganesh has the power to remove obstacles. It's explained like that in our scriptures. But he gets his power from Lord Nrsimha. It's interestingly enough, there's also another side to this. There are prayers by Shanidev. Shanidev is actually, he's a demigod. He's a great devotee of Lord Nrsimha. And Shanidev is actually, Nrsimha appears in what is called the Mangala Vamsa. So we know that there are 9 planets. Mangala means Mars, okay? So he appears in the Mangala Vamsa in the Mars dynasty. Now Mars is in many ways the opposite of Saturn, Shani. Shani means Saturn. So Mars and Saturn, they're like opposites. Saturn is a great devotee of Lord Nrsimha. So Saturn or Shani, who is like the energy of obstacles. Shani is very interesting because Saturn rules the masses. Saturn also can manifest as obstacles for people, right? Saturn demands patience. So all of these kinds of qualities, Saturn is very slow, right? Very slow. Sometimes you see devotees who have a certain kind of karma where when they want to do something, there are always obstacles. It takes a long time because they've got a certain kind of Saturn energy in that area of life. So even though they make endeavor, it takes a long time because one thing comes up, another thing. So for those people, they have a certain karma where they're forced to learn the qualities of patience, sobriety, determination, constant persistence, endurance in order to achieve anything, right? They have to develop those qualities. The very interesting thing though, is that Lord Nrsimha, being a great devotee of Saturn being his devotee, Shani being his devotee, if you pray to Lord Nrsimha, it can give the determination to overcome all obstacles. You see? So consider it like energies. Shani is like the immovable object. Mars is like the unstoppable force. So when you have the immovable object, you need the unstoppable force to overcome the immovable object. So when we pray to Lord Nrsimha, that determination comes. You see? That determination comes. There's a very interesting term, Hridaya Dorbalyam, weakness of heart. Okay? That also links to this idea of spiritual strength. When someone has spiritual strength, they are determined. Things can take a long time, but they just do not stop. And that determined effort ultimately attracts the mercy of the Lord. Because at higher stages of spiritual life, it's not something that you just get overnight. You have to work for it. You have to want it, and you have to work for it. So when we pray to Lord Nrsimhadev, we can request that quality of determination, determined effort. So whatever immovable objects, so-called immovable objects we experience in our journey, whatever we experience in life, setbacks, reversals, health-wise, in relation to people, if you pray to Lord Nrsimhadev, he will give you the strength, that fearlessness, that determination that causes you to be guaranteed success in overcoming every single obstacle. Very, very powerful. And that is one of the blessings of reciting such prayers that Prabhupada has given, especially this Nrsimhadev prayer. Thank you. Okay. So why do we recite these prayers instead of the full Nrsimhadev Kavach prayers that Prahlad Maharaj recites for protection? So there's a statement in the Shastra, Acharyavan Purusho Veda. There are many prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev. That one that we recite is just one of them, but there are many others. In fact, maybe I'll show you this one to you as well. So let me show you this. I'm just going to bring this up on the Veda base. So bear with me 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Here it is. So this prayer, this is actually a verse from the Veda base. I touched upon it before. I'm going to bring this up for you, I'm going to share my screen now so you can see this. Because to your point, to your question, there's more than one prayer we can recite, actually. So it's not that Prabhupada is exclusively that prayer, but that is one of many that we can recite, and that's one that Prabhupada has given, which is very concise, but also has the right mood to it, the mood of taking shelter, the mood of glorification of Prabhupada, of Prahlad Maharaj, who's a great devotee, and we also are indirectly being asked to notice his example, his endurance, his devotion, his equanimity in moving forward while taking shelter. So this is another prayer though. 518.8. Om Namo Bhagavate Nrsimhaya. Namas Tejas Tejase Avya Avya Bhava. Vajranaka Vajradamstra Kamasayan. Randaya Randaya Tumo Grasa Grasa Swaha. Abhiyam Abhiyam Atmani Bhuyishta On Shroom. And it's a very powerful prayer. And again, Prabhupada, in the purple, he's also going to say this point. Let's see where it is. Let's see where this is. So here, Prabhupada says, therefore we should always offer our prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev, who killed Hiranyakashipu, the personification of material desire. Hiranya means gold and Kashipu means a soft cushion or bed. Materialistic persons always desire to make the body comfortable, and for this they require huge amounts of gold. Thus, Hiranyakashipu was a perfect representative of materialistic life. He was therefore the cause of great disturbance to the topmost devotee Prahlad Maharaj until Lord Nrsimhadev killed him. Any devotee aspiring to be free of material desires should offer his respectful prayers to Nrsimhadev as Prahlad Maharaj did in this verse. So offer your respectful prayers to Nrsimhadev. Prayers, again, plural, as Prahlad Maharaj did in this verse. So you can do more than one. But this one that was chosen by Prabhupada is one of a few, many, and there's others, including, you can recite that verse, by the way. That verse can also be recited. And just on that point, before we go on to any other questions, I'll also go on to the next verse, which is given in this Bhagavatam, because it also relates to Prahlad Maharaj. So this is 518.9. And this verse is very powerful if you want to bring about freedom from envy. Okay, so these two verses actually, 518.8 and 518.9, they actually free one of the mode of ignorance. Okay, and I'll explain how this works. Let's go back one, because I think it will actually help you to see what I mean by that. So in this first verse 5:18.8, what's being spoken about here, tamo grasa grasa, tama, the ignorance in the material world, okay? So that's what's actually being requested. The ignorance of our consciousness is being removed. So please appear in our hearts and drive away our ignorance. So that's the envy, the lust, all the kind of material attachments. You recite this prayer, you're asking for the ignorance to be removed, okay? And ignorance includes fear. Fear means ignorance. So we're asking for our ignorance to be removed so that we may be fearless. Now in the next verse, 5:18.9, what is being said here, may there be good fortune throughout the universe, and may all envious persons be pacified. Envy, again, ignorance. May all envious persons be pacified. May all living entities become calm. So when I asked you at the beginning, what happens when people en masse are not fearful, they're not insecure, you get more of this peace, equanimity, calm. May all living entities become calm by practicing what? By practicing bhakti yoga. But by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. Now, this is very interesting. What that means is, if we don't have that mood of being the well-wisher of each other, it means we're still in the process of really accepting devotional service. You see? We're still learning to accept devotional service. We like to think of it that everyone's a devotee in our community, they've accepted. No, not necessarily. If the person is not yet at the stage where they're thinking of the welfare of others, each other, if we're not at the stage that we are the genuine well-wisher of each other, there's still work for us to do to really accept at heart this process and this philosophy of devotional service. Okay, let's move on. Some devotees are a bit apprehensive in praying specifically Ugra Nrsimha, due to his destructive mood. What do you say? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I have Ugra Nrsimha deities, so since you're asking, we'll make it personal. Yeah, it's true. Generally, to be honest with you, Ugra Nrsimha is only prayed to by renunciates, generally. But you can get permission. It's a bit subtle. It's specific people should get. If you want to do that, if you're a renunciate, that's fine. Even if you're a renunciate, actually, you should get permission. You should get permission. If you're not a renunciate, you should get permission, especially. Otherwise, there are stories of people who are renunciate and who are not renunciates who pray to Ugra Nrsimha. The thing with Ugra Nrsimha is that everywhere he looks, he sees Hiranyakashipu. You see, and because of that, his mood is in the mood of killing. You see, so with Ugra Nrsimha, he can tend to just take everything away. But there are certain people who are allowed to worship if they're given permission by advanced devotees. You see, I remember when we spoke to and I'll give you darshan another time. On this occasion, we won't be able to do it, but I promise I can send an image, but on another occasion I can give you darshan. Okay, on this occasion we won't be able to do so, but I'll just explain this point. What was I going to say about Ugra Nrsimha there? Yeah. So if you have permission, he won't be. He's Ugra Nrsimha, but he won't be Ugra Nrsimha with you. If you get permission, what happens is he'll be Ugra Nrsimha with other people. You see, but not with you. What can happen is he'll act almost like your protector. He'll act like your protector, not almost. He acts as your protector. So it's almost, yeah, he acts as your protector. So as you're engaging in devotional service, he protects you from any obstacles, anything that can interfere with your own progress in spiritual life. Okay, so that's how it works. But yeah, if you're not a renunciate, and even if you are, the general etiquette is to get permission before you worship Ugra Nrsimha, and it's generally not for those who are not renunciates. Yeah. So he can have a mood of like negativity, but it won't be to the devotion. it will be to those things which interfere with the devotion. That's the basic point. Yeah, Acharya Vampurusha Veda means the one who knows the Acharya understands what's what. In other words, you see, there are many different teachings. We have statements by our previous Acharyas. We have many different statements in our scriptures, many different statements. But what we're meant to do is understand all of those different statements through the lens of our present day founder Acharya. You see, that's the way it's understood. So what I meant by that is, for example, there are many prayers in the Shingadev, right? But we chant this particular prayer in the morning. You do have permission to chant other prayers in the Shingadev, which are in line. But we chant this particular prayer because Prabhupada, being aware of so much of the vast range of prayers, he has selected the ones which are appropriate for us in this day and age for us to move forward in our spiritual life. That's the point. That's what I mean by the Acharya knows what's what. There are many statements, but then you say, okay, of all the statements of the previous Acharyas, all these different prayers, what is being emphasized by our present day Acharya? You see? Like when we sing morning prayers to Guru, there are many prayers to the spiritual master. But Prabhupada has selected of those many prayers, these ones are the ones which he's made standard. So like that, that's what I mean. Okay. Okay, Sham. I've also heard that when worshipping Lord Nrsimhadev, we should also have Gaunitai, yeah, in the mood of Gaunitai. Yeah, that often happens, yes. So Nrsimhadev in Mayapur is Ugra Nrsimha. However, when deities in the Dham of Mayapur, they take on the mood of the predominant deity in Mayapur, you see? So who is the predominant deity in Mayapur is Lord Chaitanya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And what is his mood? His mood is Audarya, okay? It's compassion, right? Mercifulness. So because his mood is Audarya, then that Nrsimhadev that you see in Mayapur, although he's Ugra Nrsimha, he has that mood of Audarya. Therefore, he's still very kind, very caring, very protective. You see, like that. So that's actually often the explanation behind having Gaunitai. Also, Gaunitai are our deities for preaching, because they emphasize the Sankirtan mission. Gaunitai are in the preaching mood. When Lord Chaitanya is with Lord Nityananda, he's in the mood of preaching. Our acharyas, I believe it was Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, they were also aware of prayers of worship of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the mood of Gaur Gadadhar, right? So in the previous acharyas, some of them had Gaur Gadadhar deities. But when Lord Chaitanya is with Gadadhar Pandit, he's not in the mood of preaching, he's in a different mood. It's a little bit more subtle, but those differences are there. Okay, so yes, that's a little bit about Gaunitai and that mood of, yes, so Lord Nrsimhadev will take on that mood. Simran, you mentioned how Lord Nrsimhadev can remove anatas like lust from our hearts without us feeling a thing. Are there any indications of the fact that the process of anatta nivriti is actually occurring? Or do we just one day realize that the anatta is no longer there? Generally, what happens is it's a gradual process. Okay, so what you'll find is two things. You'll find that you have less taste, we have less attachment and attraction to material things. And we'll find that we have more taste, more attachment, and more interest in spiritual life, and especially in the direct spiritual practices. Yeah, like that. We'll have more taste for hearing, more taste for chanting, right? And we'll have more surrender. That's one of the key signs. You will want to give more to the mission of the Lord. You'll be like, wow, this is incredible. I wanna do more for Krishna. You know, you'll feel that desire arise within your heart more and more, like that. You know, so there's many different symptoms, but those are some of the things that one will experience. And because one is going from anatta nivriti to nishta, one will also feel less burdened by their anattas. That's one thing. The mind will be more controlled. That's another symptom. One will naturally feel a stronger sense of knowledge, or let's say the mode of goodness will more strongly arise within one's consciousness. That will be another symptom that one is moving through anatta nivriti to the higher stages of anatta nivriti, and then from anatta nivriti to nishta, like that. So there's a graduation. Yeah, in fact, so we say Kanishta, Madhyam, and Uttama, but there are subdivisions in each and every stage, right? So you have your Kanishta Kanishta, you have your Madhyam Kanishta, and you have your topmost or Uttama Kanishta, right? So that's within the Kanishta stage, there's 3 stages of Kanishta. Then you have your Kanishta Madhyam, then you have your Madhyam Madhyam, and then you have your Uttama Madhyam, right? Your topmost Madhyam. So even in the Madhyam stage, there's 3 stages. You can subdivide it, and the Acaryas do that. Then you have the Uttama, you have the Kanishta Uttama, right? The beginning Uttama. Then you have your Madhyam Uttama, and then you have your Uttama Uttama. So those delineations are also made in our tradition as well. So yeah, that's how it works. Okay. Any other questions or comments before we close?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, it's Kanchan Abja.
Haribol Prabhu, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for the class. I just wanted to ask a question about the mood of prayer with Lord Nrsimhadev, because we're often saying we're in our journey in Krishna consciousness, we're trying to develop a loving relationship with Radha Krishna. And when we're praying to Lord Nrsimhadev for protection and for strength, and like you mentioned, these couple of verses in the Bhagavatam to help us to get out of the mode of ignorance and freedom from envy, it kind of feels a little bit like I want Lord Nrsimhadev to help me with my relationship, to remove all these obstacles so then I can carry on my relationship with Radha and Krishna. Should I also be in this mood of trying to develop a relationship with Lord Nrsimhadev whilst praying for things to help me?
So it works this way. When you pray to a deity, generally, you're building a relationship with them. When you offer to your deities, when you pray to them, you're building a relationship with them. But why you're building a relationship with them is actually part of it. So you're right. First of all, and this is really important, and Prabhupada says this explicitly in one purport in the Bhagavad Gita. He says that our focus should be on Krishna in Vrindavan. That's where we're going. You should be very clear. We're not going to Vaikuntha. No. We're not going to Dwarka. We're not even going to Mathura, right? We are going to Goloka Vrindavan. Our Acaryas, our line is Goloka Vrindavan, is there. However, this Prabhupada who's from Goloka Vrindavan has told us to worship Lord Nrsimhadev in a specific way. We're worshipping him in that mood of nivriti. We want some things to be removed so we can do the poverty, which is come closer to Krishna, right? Vrajendananda Krishna, Krishna in Vrindavan, Raj Krishna. So what are we asking the Nrsimhadev to do? I'm stuck in this material world. Please free me of the lust of the material world. Please free me of the envy of the material world. Please free me of the ignorance of the material world. Why? So I can go to Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. Right? So that's the mood. We're praying to him, but it's a specific mood that we're requesting to be free of the maya of the material energy and to be protected from the material energy so we can make a peaceful journey back to Goloka Vrindavan. So think of Nrsimhadev as like your bodyguard and think of Krishna like your lover, okay? The thing is we want to get back to our lover, but we know that the journey to get back can be a dangerous journey, so we need the bodyguard, okay? So Nrsimhadev is the bodyguard, Krishna is the lover, okay? So we get protection, so we can make the journey back to our beloved. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really like that analogy about the bodyguard and the lover. That's really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Is it okay to ask one more question?
Yeah, thank you.
So one more question, Prabhu, was you touched on this, that our weakness comes from our eternal nature.
No, yes and no. What I mean by that is that tendency to want to be Ananda, to want to experience pleasure, in its normal state, it's not a weakness, but that gets corrupted here, right? In other words, you have something that's very pure, but when it's expressed through the wrong medium, it becomes negative, okay? I'll give you some examples, because this is very interesting that you've touched upon this. So in the material world, what do we want to do? We want to control and enjoy. So which movies make the most money? There's movies which make lots of money and they have two themes, right? So two themes, sex and violence, right? Sex is enjoy, right? So the desire to enjoy is getting subverted in that way. Violence is to control. So the desire to control is being perverted in that way. So what you find constantly are certain elements which are expressed in a very perverted form. There's degrees of perversion in the material world, okay? And that's what's happening. So in the same way, Anandamaya, right? Anandamaya, we're pleasure seeking by nature. If we don't experience pleasure in its pure form through service and surrender to Krishna, we'll be forced to look for it in its perverted reflection through material pursuits. That's what I meant.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Any other questions? Okay, Milan, let's have a look at your question. How much do we depend on one Supreme Personality alone? Krishna takes on these many forms to display different moods. For example, the Shingadev will destroy our spiritual obstacles and protect us. And yes, that is Krishna. But just like the gopis who saw Krishna as their all in all, and thus the one who will protect them, destroy any obstacles, etc. Yes, so as you engage in service to Lord Nrsimhadev, well, let's put it another way. As you engage in service to Krishna in the form of the mission, right? So that's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, everything else will be revealed. In other words, if you follow the teachings of Prabhupada properly, the mood that's given by Prabhupada properly, all of these deities, they take their respective role in helping you to go back to Goloka Vrindavan. If you follow the teachings properly, for example, what has Prabhupada given us? Krishna book. What is Krishna book? It is a summary study of the 10th canto of Bhagavatam. And in that summary study, who is being spoken about? One person. One person, Krishna. So it's like everything culminating in the understanding of Krishna in Vrindavan as a person. And therefore, any other deity is seen in that light. Okay, everything else is seen in that light, especially as we read, hear, chant, and associate properly. Everything else is actually seen in its form of how it assists us in making the journey back to Krishna in Vrindavan. That's the point. So you see all these other deities. You pray to Nrsimhadev, please help me, please protect me so I can go back to Krishna, right? We engage in the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is non-different from the Lord, right? Because we understand Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahi Anya. By pleasing Lord Chaitanya, through engagement in the Sankirtan mission, what does he do? He reveals that he's non-different from Radha and Krishna. He gives us entrance into Vrindavan. Therefore, Prabhupada says, engaging in the Sankirtan mission is non-different from entering into the most intimate pastimes of the Lord in Vrindavan. Everything is seen in that light. Everything is seen in that connection. So you're depending on the same one, Krishna, but you're depending on him as a person, but you depend on him through the Acaryas. How do I depend on Krishna through the Acaryas? I depend on Krishna through the Acaryas by following their instruction. So when they say pray to Nrsimhadev, I pray to Nrsimhadev to remove obstacles for my service to Krishna. What every deity is prayed to or approached in the way that Prabhupada says, so that we can come closer to Krishna. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so if there are no other, okay. Let's just, please stay on school for a few minutes at the end. Okay, so I'll stay on a few minutes at the end. I can see another question. Who in the material world is possibly qualified enough to judge which adhikar stage another devotee will fall into? Please enlighten. Actually, everyone should be able to judge. The actual expectation of Prabhupada is that if you study the scripture properly, you understand the symptoms of every different stage, okay? And this is meant primarily for you to understand where you are. Am I Kanishta Adhikari? Am I a Madhyam Adhikari? Am I an Uttama Adhikari? It's done objectively by knowing the Lakshana. I think it's 7th canto Bhagavatam. Anyway, even if it's not 7th canto, but I think it is. It's Narada Muni explains, Yashya lakshanam proktam. Everything is understood according to its lakshana, its symptoms. Okay, so there are some verses in the Shastra and even some chapters which are like code breakers. They allow you to decode other things. So for example, that verse by Prahlad Maharaj, it allows you to understand, oh, so I can understand and evaluate things according to their qualities. Another example is the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, wherein Krishna explains the modes of material nature. So you understand the modes, that when you're observing something, oh, I can understand, oh, this is a mode of ignorance, or I can understand this is a mode of passion, or I can understand this is a mode of goodness. You can understand it, you can evaluate it according to symptoms, which are given in the Shastra. And it's actually our job to do that so that we can serve. So what do I mean by this? Just like a doctor, if the doctor can understand, okay, I can understand by symptoms that this person has this particular illness, then I can help them to cure the illness. You see? And the other thing to point out, Shivali, is that we all do this naturally anyway. This idea of evaluation is something that we always do. But the fear is that the evaluation is done with bad intention. Then it's destructive. You see? So when evaluation is done with love, like a mother evaluating, oh, there seems to be something wrong with the child, they've got a temperature, etc. So now mother knows we need to take the child to the doctors. There's something wrong. Or like the doctor evaluates with love. I can tell by the symptoms that this person has this particular illness. So now I can administer the right medicine. So evaluation done with good intention is what the scripture recommends. Evaluation done with bad intention actually is not evaluation. That's envy, right? And this is interesting. When I approach a devotee or anyone with bad intention, I invoke the lower modes. And because I invoke the lower modes, I now can no longer see the person clearly. You see, Krishna's very clever. He sets the system up that unless you have good intention, you won't be able to actually see where a person is properly. You see, but if you have good intention, then you can properly see an individual. I mean, good intention and the requisite knowledge. Then you can see and evaluate things properly. Yep. So intention is part of the thing that determines the mode that one is in. If one has the wrong intention, one has invoked a lower mode. You see? It's a very clever system. Krishna, basically, the teachings are responsive to consciousness. And in a sense, they're encrypted. Just like you have encryption on your WhatsApp, the scripture in some ways, not completely, but in some ways is encrypted. And it reveals itself according to intention. So you really want to progress. You really want to know the truth. Therefore, the scripture will reveal something more to you. That's one thing. So your own endeavor, your own sincere desire, and mercy. The two things together cause the scripture to respond accordingly. And this is delineated or indicated in the Bhagavatam, wherein it's spoken about the qualification of the hearer and the speaker. Both things are required for there to be a proper transportation or exchange of knowledge. Okay, thank you for that, Shivali. Any other question or comment before we end? Okay.